Move over, Gamora! There's a new Swordmaster coming to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. No, not Swordsman, sorry. And not Taskmaster. Well, yes, Taskmaster will be in Black Widow, but not him. Not Blade. Okay, well, yes, Blade, but wait. How many people with a sword are there in Marvel? Okay, well, this one wields the mythical Ebony Blade and will be played by Game of Thrones' Kit Harington in the upcoming Eternals movie. With headline-grabbing actors like Angelina Jolie and Selma Hayek, the importance of the Black Knight could get lost in the shuffle, but it's likely he's more important than one might think. Marvel's Hall H panel at this year's San Diego Comic-Con included an introduction to the star-studded cast of the upcoming Eternals movie. That included Angelina Jolie as Thena, Selma Hayek as Ajax, Richard Madden as Icarus, Lauren Ridloff as Makari, Kumail Nanjiani as Kingo, Brian Tyree Henry as Phastos, Don Lee as Gilgamesh, Leah McHugh as Sprite. Not on the stage, however, was Kit Harington, Jon Snow from Game of Thrones. His casting was announced around D23, playing the Black Knight, who is not an Eternal at all. So why is such a visible actor playing such a little-known character in a movie about immortal beings sent to Earth by the Celestials to protect it from the Deviants? Well, the answer might lie in who the Black Knight is for Marvel. The Black Knight's history with Marvel gives us a clue at how important he might be to the MCU's future. Black Knight is one of the oldest Marvel characters, dating all the way back to 1955. Of course, then his name was Sir Percy, and he was a knight of the Round Table fighting the likes of Morgan Le Fay and Mordred, King Arthur's sibling rivals. Ah, family. The character the Black Knight and his ebony blade crafted from a meteor, because comics, might have just gone down as a pre-Silver Age adventure comic had Sir Percy's descendants Nathan Garrett not stumbled onto his tomb after some nefarious deeds went wrong. Nathan Garrett was what any other good Silver Age comic book character would be, a scientist. But he was also a spy who was up to no good. Then he found his ancestor's tomb where the ghost of Sir Percy had big plans for his descendant. Unfortunately for Garrett, the ebony blade wouldn't draw for him because of his ill deeds. Turns out Thor isn't the only one who has judgmental weaponry. This of course goes all wrong, but not before he goes and makes himself a flying horse since his specialty is genetic manipulation. And if your specialty is genetic manipulation, why wouldn't you make yourself a winged horse? Unless you also own a convertible. I'll give you a second to figure out why. Yeah, there it is. Park inside. Garrett's third career as a supervillain also goes bad. But when doesn't it? This time he kidnapped Happy Hogan, which forces an encounter with Iron Man. You don't mess with Iron Man's friends. After a long fall from a flying horse, he has a change of heart and tells his nephew to redeem the name of the Black Knight. That nephew is Dane Whitman, the character that Kit Harington will be playing in the Eternals. After a bit of a bumpy road trying to convince the Avengers that he was the new and improved Black Knight, Whitman is eventually able to join the team. He also spent some time with the not-a-team team, the Defenders, where he found himself in the middle of Avengers and Defenders War. That involved Dormammu tricking the Defenders into looking for pieces of the evil Eye of Avalon so he could merge the Dark Dimension with ours, and Loki tricking the Avengers into stopping them because, well, Loki makes a terrible ally. Turns out none of this had anything to do with the Black Knight, who had been turned to stone by the Enchantress. If you can't trust Dormammu and Loki, well, actually that makes total sense. You just can't trust Dormammu and Loki. Whitman had gone back in time to inhabit the Black Knight of times of old, this time Eobar Garrington of the 12th century. He liked it there and refused to come back, though in Garrington's body he did do a little time traveling because why not? When time-traveling Avengers caused Garrington's body to be destroyed, Whitman returned to his old body, now no longer in stone. Where did the original Garrington go? Who knows? Perhaps to another dimension, something that won't seem out of place soon. Or maybe even an earlier Black Knight. Yeah, it's like there was a Black Knight musical Chairs. It's possible because after Whitman's return to modern times, he becomes taken in with the Ebony Blade's curse. A curse that is activated when it draws blood, turning the Black Knight back to stone. A sword that curses you when you draw blood with it can be kinda tricky. When Victoria Bentley tried to use a spell to restore him, she instead summoned Sir Percy, who took over for Whitman. Black Knight spirits get around is what we're saying. It gets even crazier here. During the 90s with Captain America retiring from the Avengers and Iron Man going through his own things, the Black Knight became the leader of Earth's mightiest heroes, where he met up with Proctor, who was actually Whitman from another universe who had been possessed by the Ebony Blade. During this time, Crystal from the Inhumans was also an Avenger and was in a love triangle with the Black Knight and Sersi from the Eternals. The fight with Proctor, who was skipping from dimension to dimension killing versions of Sersi after she spurned him, leads to Whitman undergoing a ritual with Sersi that ties the two of them together. Whitman became reliant on Sersi, and the two of them left the Avengers, eventually ending up in the Ultraverse, and eventually fighting a Loki there who had gathered the Infinity Gems. The Black Knight certainly gets around. During this time, he's also met with members of Heroes for Hire, MI-13, which is a British force to defend against the supernatural, and of course Excalibur with Captain Britain. So what can all of this mean for the Black Knight and the MCU? Well, one of these things we know is that the Eternals movie will span time because, as their name suggests, they're eternal, and have been here for a while influencing human mythology along the way, just like Thor and Loki. It's a cinch that if the Black Knight is in the Eternals movie, that at least a part of it will involve his romance with Sersi. In 2018, The Wrap reported several writers were invited to pitch for the Eternals that focused on Sersi, who is the one most in love with us mortal Earthlings, disguising herself to live in New York City. This, after all, is Marvel Comics. There have been set photos that hint that either Whitman's time-traveling Black Knight ways will come into play, or Sersi will have encountered one of his earlier selves, either Percy or Eobard. There won't be time for them to establish Whitman's tendency to get turned to stone, but there might be enough time to establish the Ebony Blade's curse, which could lead to the bond between Sersi and Whitman, perhaps even tying her to the various Black Knights throughout time. It wouldn't be the first time a long-lived character hooked up with multiple generations. Steve Rogers kissed Peggy Carter and her and possibly his niece Sharon Carter. Of course, Kit Harington is no stranger to strange family love, being from Game of Thrones. But why such a high-profile actor like Kit Harington for the romance interest of a character in an ensemble movie? Well, there's another parallel for the MCU that fits right into the Black Knight story. Captain America has retired from saving the world, having gone back in time and gotten that life Tony was telling him all about, and Iron Man made the big sacrifice at the end of Endgame, leaving a very familiar gap in the Avengers team, one that the Black Knight has filled before. But there's even more importance than just leading a new version of Earth's mightiest heroes. That's not likely to feature Crystal from the Inhumans, as there so far haven't been any plans to remind people that ever happened. The Black Knight's universe-skipping ways have led to a few encounters, and could end up playing out as the multiverse becomes an issue for Doctor Strange. Between universe skipping and time skipping, the Black Knight has run into both Magneto and an earlier version of presumed proto-mutant Apocalypse. This means that the Black Knight could end up helping bridge the current MCU and the one that will eventually include mutants. Yay! This also means that the Black Knight is an Avenger who has romantic ties to the Eternals and run-ins with the history of the mutants. But he's not done yet. When we say that the Black Knight gets around, we really mean that the Black Knight gets around. Remember we talked about the Ebony Blade and its accompanying curse? Well, this has meant that Whitman has had a difficult on and off relationship with the Ebony Blade, at times giving it up for a more technological version of the blade because of course Whitman is also a scientist. Silver Age loved its scientist. And occasionally getting other magic weapons like the Sword of Light and Shield of Night. At one point he thought he had returned to his Ebony Blade, but it was a fake made by Dracula himself. Dracula, of course, is not only the world's most famous public domain vampire, he's the chief foe of Marvel's vampire-hating Daywalker Blade, who will be played by Mahershala Ali in an upcoming project. His connections to potential future MCU characters doesn't stop there. Long before joining the superhero team Excalibur, he had to use the actual Excalibur to find a lost Captain Britain at the behest of Merlin. Yeah, that Merlin. Kevin Feige has been talking about bringing Captain Britain, a man named Brian Braddock, who was given the power of Captain Britain by Merlin, to the MCU, and in December of last year, Ain't It Cool News even reported a rumor that Guy Ritchie was being courted to direct a Black Knight and Captain Britain movie. While that may have been just a rumor, with the Black Knight making his appearance in the Eternals, it does hint that Marvel Studios is looking to expand the world of the MCU beyond New York and feature some of the heroes from around the world. Captain Britain has his own crossover appeal, being the twin brother of mutant Psylocke. Dormammu has already appeared in the MCU, as well as Loki. The MCU's main timeline Loki met an unfortunate end trying to kill Thanos, and an alternate timeline Loki was able to peace out with that timeline's version of the Tesseract. We'll get to find out what that timeline's Loki gets up to as he skips through space with the Space Stone-powered Tesseract in the Disney Plus series Loki, which also might have him trip through time. But what's more important is that Loki's series is planned for release after the Doctor Strange sequel Multiverse of Madness. Dormammu has promised to leave our dimension alone after Doctor Strange trapped him in a time loop, but Dormammu has been forced into that promise in a lot of the comics and tends to find a way to weasel out of it. Loki's series could very well be influenced by the events of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and might even see him dealing with or double-dealing Dormammu, something that the Black Knight knows all too well. So from a seemingly obscure Marvel hero, the Black Knight is actually interconnected with all of the presumed major players of Phase 4 and beyond. The only thing we know so far for sure is that he'll play a role in the upcoming Eternals movie that will focus on Sersi, someone he had troubled relationship with. But from there, the Black Knight could fit into the rest of the future of the MCU. He could end up taking over a new team of Avengers. As a result of his troubled relationship with Sersi, he could end up tripping through time and the multiverse, coming across Apocalypse or summoning Magneto by accident. Perhaps this causes him to lead the Avengers against the X-Men in the Avengers vs. the X-Men, another storyline that Feige has expressed some interest in. or he'll team up with Captain Britain and the new Excalibur team, or simply help introduce Britain's Defender. Maybe his blade will end up being a product of Dracula or another vampire, helping to introduce Blade into the MCU. Any of these are possible, though it's not likely that all of them will happen. But Kit Harington could end up filling the role that Nick Fury did during the Infinity Saga, playing a small role in everyone's story. It's more likely that the MCU will pick up one or two of these larger stories to have the Black Knight play out and perhaps only hint at his other connections to the other characters. But more than any other character on the horizon for Phase 4 and beyond, the Black Knight connects them all. Game of Thrones alumni have had a bit of a rough time in the MCU so far, with Finn Jones as Iron Fist, Iwan Rowan as Maximus in the Inhumans, and Sophie Turner as Jean Grey over at Fox's Mutantverse. But here's hoping for good things for Kit Harington and the Black Knight. He has literally worlds of possibilities. And that's just some of the connections that the Black Knight could have in the MCU going forward. What story would you like to see in the MCU? Let us know in the comments, and while you're there, why not hit that subscribe button to make a connection between your inbox and the latest videos? Thanks for watching.